on Bitcoin development. My name is Aaron Van Wirdum. I work for Bitcoin Magazine. I'll let the panelists introduce themselves. Let's start with Peter.
Yeah, I'm Peter Todd. I'm Peter Todd. There you go.
There you go.
I'm Peter Todd. Regarding Bitcoin development, I mean, I've done some Bitcoin Core work as well as worked on open timestamps, in particular known for shutting down other people's ideas.
Among other things. My name is Jimmy Song, and I am a Bitcoin developer, educator, teacher. I do have a few commits to my name, though that's been a while. And you know, I write about a lot of this stuff and I have a podcast and stuff, so yeah.
Cool. Hi, I'm Lisa. I also go by Nifty or Nifty Nye on the internet. I work at Blockstream on Core Lightning and been doing that for about 4 years now. And I also just started this year a kind of a side project teaching people about the Bitcoin protocol called Base58, which is a online school for stuff.
Hi, I'm Martin. I co-maintain the Rust Bitcoin repository, and I also created my own cryptoanarchy Debian repository, which is collection of Debian packages with Bitcoin, Lightning, and whatever. So that are my main project. I have some side projects as well, and I co-founded Parallelnapolis Bratislava.
All right, thank you. Okay, I want to start with a topic that's kind of been on my mind recently. So obviously, I'm not a developer, so I very much have an outside perspective. But it seems to me that in the recent year, maybe, a lot of Bitcoin, and especially Bitcoin Core developers, have been quitting. Vladimir stepped down. Carl Dang recently announced that he's done. Jonas Snelly quit. Who else? Yeah, John Newberry quit. Is this a trend? Is there something going on? Is there something we need? Is there something to worry about here? Is this a trend, guys? Who wants to take this?
I'll start. You have to understand, like, as a developer, it's not normal to work on something for like 10 years plus. You know, most developers, if you get into this stuff, you know, if you get into the space, you work at a company 3-4 years, you move on, or you know, you stay at a company maybe 1 or 2 years sometimes, depending on what area of the country you're in, or you know, where you happen to work. But that's not, you know, it's not really normal to work on a single project for like over 10 years. So, you know, you get curious about other technologies, you get other interests. It's normal to think, okay, well, you know, I want to try something else, right? How many of you have like changed careers or changed jobs, right, in 10 years? Lots of you, I hope. That's a normal thing, and you know, at certain points you might burn out on something like that. Also, Bitcoin Core is a very different type of environment than almost anything else. And it's because it's open source, it's because it's decentralized, but there's no roadmap there, right? It's not like, okay, you have to get this done by, you know, first quarter of 2024 or something like that, and you work towards it, and then, you know exactly the process that you're gonna have to do to get this thing merged into Core. It's not how it works. You know, you kind of have to get consensus, convince people to review your code. You have to do the same for other people. So it's, you know, especially having done that for a while, it's normal for a lot of these people to want to go and try something else. And maybe they come back, maybe they don't. But I wouldn't call it like some sort of major trend that, you know, because of all the toxic maximalists or something like that, that it's happening.
Is it a coincidence then that it's all happening now, or is it just in my mind?
I mean, I think one of the driving forces is that the interesting things to be done on Bitcoin Core, I mean, we've been gradually doing those things. You know, I mean, I myself, I did a lot more work on Bitcoin Core quite a few years ago, and I kind of had a mental checklist of, all right, here's the things I would like to go do, and those things got implemented. And I had other stuff I was interested in doing, and those things didn't involve contributions to Bitcoin Core. If anything, those things were kind of actively promoting the idea that you shouldn't have to do contributions to Bitcoin Core to do interesting things. And, you know, I'd like to think my own project showed that, but frankly, you know, Lightning is a far better example of this. I mean, Lightning's amazing, and very little had to change in Bitcoin Core to implement it.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think, like, you know, when you look at Bitcoin as an ecosystem, maybe the number of people, I think the people in core, like, I haven't been keeping track of it, but I know we've definitely brought some new people in the last year or so. I think Chain Code's been doing a lot of really great work to get new people contributing to core. Still waiting for the first Base 58 graduate to have a Bitcoin core contribution. It's going to happen. I got my fingers crossed. If you're out there and you've taken Base 58, I'm counting on you to, you know, increase the number of Bitcoin developers there. But I also think, like, you know, speaking of Lightning, if you look at the Lightning ecosystem, the number of people that are building on Bitcoin but aren't doing work in core specifically, I think has definitely grown. One of the cool things about Lightning, if I could like kind of show the Lightning developer ecosystem for 5 seconds here. One thing that's really cool about Lightning and very different than core, I think, is how decentralized as a process that it is. Core is pretty monolithic. I know there's a lot of like kind of efforts to build like alternate implementations of core, like Lalu from Labs has BTCD. I think there's like the Rust project to try and build like another thing. But those are kind of more one-off efforts that I think are not kind of like supported by like organizations. Whereas if you look at Lightning, Lightning is very different. There's 4 active implementations that are supported by large institutions and that have, each of them has their own kind of ecosystem. So that's LDK, that's Core Lightning, the project I work on. That's the Lightning Labs L&D project. That's Async Eclair and Phoenix Wallet. So these are each like ecosystem, you know, as Lightning as an ecosystem is quite big. There's a lot of people working on it across a bunch of different implementations. And, you know, if one Lightning implementation went away, there would be like a bunch of others still around and stuff. So,
And maybe I should just point out, I mean, there's a big difference between Lightning and Bitcoin Core in terms of how safe it is to have all these different implementations. You know, Lightning does not have a global consensus other than kind of what it inherits from Bitcoin. It's okay if my Lightning implementation doesn't do precisely the same thing as her Lightning implementation. That's fine. We might not be able to send money to each other all the time, but that's okay. I can still send money to, you know, you. Whereas like with Bitcoin Core, if 2 different implementations disagree, all hell breaks loose, and a whole bunch of people lose a ton of money. And the stakes are just so much higher. And frankly, computer science doesn't know how to make multiple implementations of Bitcoin that actually agree to the extent you can use them for mining.
That's an interesting topic you bring up because Martin, you were telling me earlier, you've looked at a couple of Bitcoin implementations and you weren't very impressed by what you found. Is that right?
More like non-core software, just some applications that build on top of existing things. So yeah, some of them are not that great actually, but.
And that means buggy or?
Well, maybe they have some suspicious things. I will not name names, but for instance, one that kind of triggered me was not having any tests on a rec test. Like there was no support of rec test, Signet, testnet, whatever, nothing. And unfortunately, it's quite popular.
Okay, and why would that be? Because there's not enough developers or not enough attention for these kinds of mistakes?
I'm not sure really. Maybe not enough attention is the thing.
Yeah, I would say the reason for that is the core development process is way stricter in many ways than almost anything else. So if you've worked in this industry, you know, like some shops will have unit tests and documentation and things like that. A lot of them don't, right? It's just sort of like the Wild West out there. Let's see what happens. And they do that because there's not, it isn't money, right? You don't need that level of security when you're making a single page app on some server somewhere and it's, you know, recipes or something. Like, I mean, who cares if somebody doesn't get a recipe once in a while? But if you're like preventing somebody from sending money, that's a big deal. So the level of rigor that you need means that you need stuff like unit tests and, you know, functional tests and, you know, documentation and all sorts of scaffolding that you might not need in other software projects. I suspect that's a large reason. And you know, when people code, they code what they know. And hey, I was working on this website for a while. Let's just do whatever that website was doing, you know, and make like a core version of that, an implementation of the Bitcoin protocol. And you know, they kind of get a lot of it right, but there's probably a lot of bugs if you're, I don't know. As a developer, it always makes me nervous when there's not unit tests on something. It's like, how do you know that code works? I don't know. You know?
I used to go work at a startup that, long story short, built equipment that would go on airplanes. And with our equipment, there were ways where it could fail in such a way that would go kill people. And our process for building that experimental test equipment was less rigorous than getting a pull request into Bitcoin Core that changed consensus code. And frankly, I mean, I think that's the right trade-off, because the reality is Bitcoin is so much bigger that yes, someone isn't going to directly die because pull request changes, but you know, you could lose millions of enough dollars that the number of suicides on average due to that would actually go work out to be more dangerous. Like, this isn't crazy, you know? I mean, certainly I wasn't working at, say, an aircraft manufacturer. I was working on experimental equipment that went on a plane, so you know, a little different, but like, this is sort of comparable, and this is why this is so rigorous. And it's, unfortunately, it's tough to attract people to this, especially now as the number of interesting things goes away. And do you really want to go to that much work just to go and add, you know, yet more unit tests to something, or make some little change in like the build process? It's important work, but it's tricky to attract people.
So should this rigor be applied to other Bitcoin projects, or is that implausible, and should people just use Bitcoin Core? Like, what's the solution here?
It should be, and I also think we should have more free ponies.
It definitely should be. And I mean, I'm in general in favor of a lot more software testing, because it just makes the software a lot more reliable. Unfortunately, like the kinds of developers that exist, they're much more focused on getting features out, right? And this is largely due to how organizations work. It's, hey, what can you implement this feature because that'll make us more money? No product manager ever wants to hear, we need to refactor so we can make the system more stable. No product manager ever likes hearing that. But if you're a developer, you know how important that is, because it gives you like a more security in how you're implementing things. And for a website, honestly, the product manager might be right. For money, you need to make sure, and you can see it in all these altcoins, right? They have exploits all the time. There are all kinds of ridiculous and stupid bugs that exist. I mean, like, seriously, a multisig that works with 0 of 3 or something like that? That's idiotic. Any competent programmer should have been able to catch that. Yet that sort of stuff gets through because they don't freaking write unit tests, right? So, the level of rigor that's in core development, I think, is evident in the lack of some of these exploits that are clear in all of these other protocols that come out all the time.
All right, other topic. We recently had an arrest of a not a Bitcoin developer, an Ethereum developer in the Netherlands, of the Tornado Cash protocol. How does this affect Bitcoin development? Does it affect Bitcoin development? Is this something you guys are concerned about?
I mean, I think, everyone who writes open source software should be concerned about this. Although the concern for Bitcoin developers is, I think, definitely less than for, say, other types of software developers. For instance, if I was working on JoinMarket, I would certainly be more concerned about this than if I was working on, say, Bitcoin Core, which is certainly much more farther removed from what the guy is being, put in jail for. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I think there's a reasonable chance he's going to be let free because, the crime they're accusing of him doesn't fit. But this is an issue. On the other hand, I got to point out, I mean, I personally am the target of a lawsuit by Craig Wright. And we've won the first round, and now it's gone to appeal, and Craig will probably go lose second round. But these kinds of things turn developers away. I mean, who wants to expose themselves to an industry where you wind up in lawsuits by people like Craig Wright? And at the very least, we owe it to developers, not just in Bitcoin Core, but across the whole ecosystem, to ensure that there is funding available to fight these lawsuits, because this stuff will happen. I mean, that's just the nature of the legal system. And there has to be the funding available, because there's no other way to avoid this. You know, as long as you want to attract people who aren't crazy, you know, even the people who go behind pseudonyms like Hodlnaut, who of course is being sued too, you know, it's just it's a risk if there isn't that funding available. So I'm glad there is, but there needs to be more of it.
And apparently even stepping down as core developer doesn't solve your problem.
Case in point.
Right.
You know, literally part of my legal defense was, well, I haven't committed to Bitcoin Core in years. Well, that's not enough, and you still get sued. It just means the case is more likely to get thrown out. But, you know, getting a case to the point where it's thrown out costs a lot of money.
Yeah. Lisa, is this something you're concerned? Well, not the Greg Wright, but the Tornado Cash precedent. Is this something, you know, that affects your
Yeah, I mean, so
work?
the Tornado Cash thing, I've heard, like, I'm not, there's a few things around that like, I think are kind of interesting. One is, like, what is he being charged of exactly? This might be a rumor, it might be true, but my understanding is he was getting, like, this is, like, and this is kind of, I want to, I think, maybe bring in, like, a new topic around incentives, right? Like, I think what my understanding is what he got charged with, or the reason that they're, like, what they're charging him, accusing him of, is profiting from the anonymity, right? He, like, got issued some tokens, and so he was, like, earning rewards from helping people launder money, and that was what they, like, locked him up for. Maybe I'm wrong about that. That might be, like, fake news, so.
I don't know. Does anyone know? Because that's news to me if that's the case.
Don't quote me, but yeah, my understanding is the charges weren't, like, the software. It was the, you know, the remuneration or his economic interest in the Tornado Cash, so holding these torn tokens
Right.
is what he was charged with. So I thought that was kind of interesting, you know, from a Bitcoin perspective or Lightning. Like, I am, you know, building protocols in Bitcoin, and this is, like, kind of, you know, this, like, topic of incentives, like, what incentives are there as a Bitcoiner to work on Core or any of the open source software, right? It's not exactly the most remunerative project you could work on across the crypto ecosystem. Like, you know, you could go write Solidity contracts for millions of dollars, so I hear.
Especially when they turn out to be broken and a hacker mysteriously steals it all.
Yeah, mysteriously ending up with lots of money in my ETH wallet, you know. Yeah, so I think there's, like, you know, like, so incentives of working on, you know, and so, like, there is definitely, like, one of the, if, as, like, Peter mentions, a lot of the maybe nerd, like, I think for a long time, a lot of nerds got kind of nerd sniped by Bitcoin. I know I definitely did. You're like, oh my God, this is so cool. I want to work on it because it's, like, so incredible. But if a lot of the cool, interesting, maybe lower hanging technical challenges are, like, I don't want to say solve. There's always going to be new problems that we can solve. But, like, if a lot of that's off the table, if there's not, like, you know, what's the path to becoming a multi-gajillionaire in Bitcoin these days? It's not like we're doing ICOs. It's not like you're going to be early in whatever. So I think a lot of open source devs kind of have to work pretty hard to get grants and funding. And luckily, there's really great institutions that are, you know, donating money or supporting open source work. But it's not like you're going to get, like, you know, shares in a company, which might hit the moon someday. And then, you know, like, for, you know, when you work at, like, a big startup or something, you kind of tend to get, like, not golden handcuffs, but people stay at organizations working maybe longer than they would otherwise, long after they're interested in the product, because they do have, like, some economic interest in shares that they can't exit without, or, you know, the taxes keep them there for a long time. And Bitcoin doesn't have any of these things, is, I guess, what I'm trying to say, right? There's no golden handcuffs on Bitcoin. You know, a lot of the technical challenges are kind of ugly maintainer muck work, I think. And so, like, yeah, why would you become a Bitcoin dev if not for, like, you know, personal whatever?
Yeah, the upside is it might interest you. The downside is you don't get any money, you could get sued, and you can end up in jail, basically. Martin, did you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's attack against the individual or against the project, but if it is against the project, then despite I'm not being a fan of Ethereum, I actually quite don't like it, but still I hope that they will, like, restart it, like some anonymous developers show up and restart it and maybe fork it or something, and show the censors that this is not a way to go, it doesn't work. And if they show it like this, then there is a good chance that they will just give up on attacking a Bitcoin like this. Because probably Bitcoin would have survived it this way, but we probably don't want to live through it. So,
Well, notably with Tornado Cash, the Tornado Cash smart contract and other infrastructure around it is still working. You know, jailing the developer did not make it stop, which kind of goes to shows it has to be at least somewhat decentralized.
Well, the other thing I would say is that whenever government takes action like this, whenever they regulate or whatever, what it does is it just ups the price for all of you, right? It's not just the developers that suffer. If you make the cost of anonymizing your coin higher, well, then that's just what it's going to cost. If you want privacy, maybe Tornado Cash is, some amount of money. Well, now with this regulation, you need to attract, more anonymous developers who are probably going to want to get paid a little more or something like that. So all of the costs go up. So this action by, whatever government, it's just adding to the cost. And ultimately, you guys pay for it. That's how it is, and that's what it's going to end up being. You want privacy, you're now going to have to pay that much more. And in that sense, it's sort of like a warfare against this, anonymization of wealth and wealth transfer. And that's something that a lot of governments want to do, and it will probably cost some more. Thankfully, at least in Bitcoin, there are a lot of things that make it a lot easier to do that. There are already tools that exist, and it is decentralized, unlike, Ethereum or whatever. They were talking the other day about once you move to proof of stake, you have all these people that are going to be OFAC compliant, and therefore they're not going to, process any of these Tornado Cash transactions. So, for me, like with Bitcoin, if they do implement this, it's not just the developers that are going to pay. It's all of you that want privacy, and you have to recognize that it's not just Peter that's getting sued by CSW or whoever. All of you are going to suffer as well. And for that reason, you need to take some steps to discourage, shall we say, the regulators and the politicians that are saying this stuff.
All right, I do think we're out of time. Do we have time for a question, or all right? Does anyone have a question? One question. No questions? All right. Well, give a hand to our panelists, and thank you for being here.
Okay, that's